Hey guys, so Ted from Aputure got in touch with me a few months ago and said, hey, we want to have your opinions about what you'd like to see next. And we spoke about various things, but this was one of the things I suggested. So I showed him this little piece, which I made from the leftovers of the destruction test video of the 160 LED. And I said, hey, why don't we have something like this that's super tiny and portable? And a few months later, they actually have. And worth mentioning, as usual, I don't accept money from manufacturers, so I'm not getting paid for this review. I didn't get paid for the idea, etc. You know how some companies seem to not care much about their customers? It's really nice to see on the complete other end of the spectrum, we have a company like Aputure that have this really fantastic customer service. And from what I've seen, this is pretty much in all areas. It's like getting stuff repaired. It's their communication with customers over Facebook and getting feedback from customers about what they want to see and keeping the prices really reasonable. Hi everyone, welcome back. Today we're taking a look at the lovely little Aputure M9 LED light. This is a super tiny portable little light that's intended for both video shooters who are professionals who want a tiny little light for practical lights, meaning a light that is actually visible in the scene, maybe hidden inside a lamp, or for people who want something that's super portable. I guess you could use this for photos as well, but from fairly close. And of course, if you're only shooting photos, then LED doesn't make sense. You could get a flash and that'll give you better battery performance and better power for the size. And this is intended for things that are smaller. This is intended for when you need to get a light into a very small space. It's got a CRI rating of 99, if I'm not mistaken, which is fantastic for an LED light. And it's also very affordable, so a hobbyist would have no problem buying one of these. You could take one of these in your pocket, or you could take 3 or 4 of these in a bag. It runs on an internal battery. It can be charged or used while it's being charged from a USB port. And it has a dedicated on-off button. And it's got 9 different levels of dimming. I think this will run for about an hour and something at maximum power. And I think quite a bit longer at low power like this. Amazon have these little batteries, which I'll put a link to down below, very similar size and shape, but are all battery, not a battery with electronics and lights and stuff. So it's adding a lot of extra runtime for only about double the size, which is great. They have a built-in USB cable. So the USB cable sort of pops out of the side of the battery itself. So it's keeping your kit even more compact. The M9 is built really nicely, very lightweight. Here you can see that even with the diffuser, we are getting multiple shadows, mostly only noticeable when it's moving. Now there's another reason for future versions of this to have more than 9 lights, which is if we're at maximum power, then you can notice some heat. So if you had a few more LEDs and all of them running at a little bit lower power, then you'd be using the battery slightly more efficiently. Now this came with a little adapter, which I think could be smaller because the one that came included with the 160 lights, which is actually what I'm using as my 2 backlights for this video, those are tiny. They're about this big. Now the M9 came with this nice little case. I would have been just as happy with this light if it didn't have the case because, I don't know, it does make the entire thing a little less super tiny. That's just personal preference. Now, of course, there are other lights that you could use, just like a torch or whatever. But obviously here you'll get better color accuracy, better skin tones, dimmability. I would also like this to go dimmer. For some users might still be a tiny bit too bright. And there are other small lights intended for photography and video like this one, just as an example of something that you might like. Have a look at my review of this one. It's a nice little light which is out of battery at the moment. Doesn't perform as well as the Aputure, but the one thing that it has that's going for it is it's a softer light. In other ways, the Aputure wins. Now, if you're going to get one of these M9 lights, I would recommend getting one of these little Gorilla Pods. And it allows you to place the light in pretty much an infinite number of places. So here's an example. I've connected a quick release to the tripod screw. And of course, it has a hot shoe as well. So if you want to put this on your camera, then you can. Although personally, I don't think light looks very good if it's being used on the camera, but I guess, for some situations, having it on top of the camera is the only thing you can do. You don't want to over tighten this piece that holds onto the light because that piece there can break. This was sent to me a short while ago, so now currently shipping units also have a CTO filter as an addition to this. And the last little tip is that you don't have to use the included clamp if you don't want to. You can actually just use a mobile phone clamp like this one from Joby. Here's an example of a really tiny one that can fit in your pocket. And that actually holds on nicely. So the entire review here, I've had this at minimum power, and at minimum power, this was a nice amount of light to light a small area, like, the things I've had around it here. And the entire review was shot at ISO 640, 1/50th of a second, and f2 aperture. And I measured 27 lux at 1 meter away at minimum power. And so that 27 lux is not a lot, but enough for small uses. Now at full power, we're getting 200 lux. Once again, it's not a huge amount of light, but it's very useful considering this size of light. Both measurements were taken without the diffuser, since the diffuser doesn't reduce the light a huge amount, and mainly because all my other lighting reviews were done without the diffuser attached. So my tests are always without the diffuser. And as you can see, it doesn't really make a huge difference to the brightness. So here you can see that at full power, I'm able to get a nice exposure at 1 meter away. So right now, both the camera and the light are exactly 1 meter away from that wall. And you can see that we're getting a nice exposure there. Obviously, we've got some overexposed areas because of the reflections of the photos. Now, let's say you don't have an f2 lens, you just have your kit lens. So your brightest is going to be, let's say, f3.5. Still not a bad exposure, still fine. So here at ISO 1000, we're getting, once again, a nice exposure. Okay, so right now I'm not going to look very good because it's about 1 billion degrees and I'm pretty much melting, but what I've tried to create here is to use the most minimal amount of equipment. I've allowed myself one GorillaPod, so I'm relying on a door frame to hold the light, so GorillaPod's holding onto that, just like a big scrim or a big shoot-through, depending on how you want to call it. Then a small piece of fabric to reduce that hot spot. If I have a look here on my monitor, some people are not necessarily going to like this, but it's kind of an interesting, quite a harsh backlight. My pocket torch only has maybe 5 levels of dimming, so I couldn't get it a little dimmer than this. The next step down was too dim. Here, as a hair light, it's not too bad. You're not necessarily going to notice the lack of color quality. And this here is a setup that's much easier to do, and it's done with this folding ring light diffuser. And this is actually pretty good. You just have to keep the light pretty close to the person, like at a foot away, it's already slightly too dark. So it's more like 10 inches away to get a nice exposure. You can have it on the camera, or you can have it sort of off to the side or whatever. And then do that. And the light is so small that it, it folds into it. So this light certainly has its uses, and I think it's a great addition to the Aputure lineup. And I do think this is something that every person would find uses for if they put it in their camera bag. But let's say that size isn't a huge issue and you just want a really, really good light that's small and affordable. These little guys, the Aputure 160, they are fantastic. 1500 lux rather than 200 lux. And if you want to see more from the Aputure 160 lights, check out my favorites playlist. So thanks for watching, guys. I hope you found this review useful. If you did, then of course you can support this channel by getting yours through the links down below from Amazon, eBay, or B&H. Don't forget to subscribe. Bye!